Greetings, Mavericks and new viewers. Tonight, direct and live from the Maverick News Network World Studios. This is Maverick News with Rick Walker.
America almost alone as the war with Iran continues with no end in sight. It looks like Trump is looking for allies quietly behind the scenes, but so far, no real takers. All this as Carney meets with other world leaders, Arctic world leaders in Denmark. And they all look to him for leadership in this time of crisis, not just to Carney, but to Canada. That's right, Canada taking a leadership role, filling the world's leadership vacuum tonight. All that and a whole lot more coming up right here on Maverick News.
Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals, defenders of individual rights and freedoms, credible, trusted, grounded in reality. Maverick News, Maverick News. Defending free speech, Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
I said 2 nights ago, maybe we spend way too much time focusing on Donald Trump and what he says. Of course, the actions of the president and what the U.S. does, it matters worldwide because they are sort of the world's last sole superpower. I don't know if that description is really accurate. I think that the United States still has peer power rivals in China and to some degree kind of Russia, because Russia is still a nuclear power. But the point is, Trump dominates the headlines. Everything he says makes headlines every day, day in, day out. And it is just flooding the media zone with information overload day in, day out. Meanwhile, you have all of these other stories worldwide happening as everything is being realigned, and most of it is happening without much attention being paid. Case in point, Carney. He's on the world stage. He's meeting he's in Oslo, meeting with other Arctic leaders. They're discussing ways to collaborate, work together. And it is clear they are not in alignment with what Trump is doing. There's a quiet, there are things just not being said out loud. And the things that aren't being said out loud all relate to the United States. They avoid even saying USA. They avoid saying Donald Trump. Another news conference held today because they had they've been conducting a military exercise up there, all these countries, including Canada. And as you listen to what each of the leaders says in the news conferences, they're avoiding like mentioning the United States. They still reference Russia as the main security threat to all of the Arctic countries, but they now clearly see Trump as a major security threat, and they are all aligning together to now have a dual security strategy. You can see it. You can sense it in not what they're saying, but what they are not saying. We're going to come back to that. But first, we're going to highlight something that's about to happen tomorrow, give you a little bit of a preview, and that is, again, Carney, who was praised, by the way, by the other leaders in Oslo today, who are clearly looking to him for guidance, leadership, direction, filling the leadership void, the vacuum that has been left wide open and created by the incompetence and the hubris of the president of the United States that we have right now, Donald Trump, because of his missteps, miscalculations, his habit of punching allies in the face, alienating friends while trying to keep enemies close. Carney, tomorrow, off to London to meet, I believe, with Starmer, and I believe the king as well. So here we go. Is he meeting with the king? I'll have to check on that. But I do know that Canada's High Commissioner to the UK, Bill Blair, has just arrived in London, and we have this from him giving us a preview on what we can expect tomorrow with these meetings involving Canada's Prime Minister again on the world stage. Maybe we need to spend a little more time focusing on what other world leaders are saying and a little less time listening to the daily whatever it is that we're getting from the White House.
Commissioner Blair, the Prime Minister is scheduled to meet with the King tomorrow as well as the Prime Minister. Do you have any indication of what we should expect from the meeting with His Majesty?
His Majesty and our Prime Minister actually have a long-standing relationship, and I harken back to during when Prime Minister Carney became our Prime Minister and the throne speech, and I think the King's attendance in Canada and delivering that throne speech was an important moment, not just in our relationship, but for all Canadians, as the King was quite strong and clear in his articulation of our sovereignty and his commitment to that. I believe that relationship remains a very important one, and I think it's a great opportunity for the Prime Minister to have some discussions. And by the way, as the very new High Commissioner to the United Kingdom, I'll have an opportunity myself. I'll be, of course, with Prime Minister Carney tomorrow, but on Tuesday I'm also having an opportunity to meet with the King for the very first time in this new role. And I think that really does reflect that the King places a great importance. He is our King, and a very great importance on maintaining the strength of that relationship, both, with, of course, with our Prime Minister, but also with the country.
What message do you want to bring to the King in your meeting?
Actually, I think the King will probably already know that I'm pretty chuffed about.
Do you have a message? I guess is a better way of putting it.
What's that?
Are you bringing a message, or do you think the King, like what you've obviously been briefed on where do you think the King's interests are with Canada? What message do you think he's going to be bringing?
Of course, I've been briefed on what the King's interests are, and in previous roles, I've had an opportunity to interact a bit with the King, but this is my first opportunity to meet with him as Canada's representative, as High Commissioner to the United Kingdom. But as the King has very well articulated, and I completely agree with, he's Canada's King as well. And so making sure that we have the strength of that relationship, an open line of communications, I intend to communicate to the King how much I strongly support the monarchy and its succession and his role as our head of state.
The King seems concerned by the fact that Alberta could get separate from the rest of the Canada. Do you have any? Do you want to brought it to him during your meeting, your audience?
The King has Yeah, of course. Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry about that. The king has he had a meeting earlier this week with some of the Six Nations chiefs that were here in Ottawa, and that was not the purpose of the meeting. But I know that Chief Pete, for example, raised that concern with the king, and the king is, as our head of state, also always concerned about resiliency. But at the same time, that issue, I think, more appropriately dealt with between our government and those First Nations. It is an internal matter, and I'm not unhappy that the king is concerned about the unity and strength of our country. We're all concerned about that.
Sorry, Associate Minister, but Commissioner Blair, sorry. You're talking about being freshly installed.
I answer to a lot of titles.
I know, it's like Commissioner, Chief, Minister. You've had a bunch of hats.
Yep.
How have you been finding
the one I've got now is maybe the coolest one ever. But
there we go. How have you been finding the transition, and exactly how many days have you been in London at this point?
I got here on Tuesday. I presented my credentials on Wednesday, and quite honestly, I've been drinking through the fire hose ever since, because there's some great people here who are briefing me. I've had the opportunity to speak with former High Commissioner Goodall, Janice Ray even before him, and great team of staff here. I'm learning a lot about the job, and of course they're throwing us in the deep end with the Prime Minister's arrival here today, and some of the meetings that are set up earlier this week. But it's been a busy first few days. I'm hoping it's going to be a busy few years.
Your last question.
Commissioner, I was just thinking a little more along the lines, like you are coming into this role. Is there going to be any difference in the role you play given our relationship with the U.S.? Are you also going to be a buffer in any ways in terms of the relationship with Europe? Like, I'd like to know how that works. Like, what is your understanding of it?
Well, I bring a bit of experience. I have dealt with and worked very closely with the institutions of the United States for decades. I've also, as a former minister of our government, have had a fair bit of engagement with our European allies. But I think my primary role here is to fulfill the responsibilities of the High Commissioner to the United Kingdom, to facilitate the work that our two countries do together. I think there's great opportunities to build upon trade and investment and in security and defense, and there are just so many things that we have in common. I think that will be my primary focus. But I think as well, there's an expectation that I will bring my previous experience to that role, and if it can help advance Canada's interest in the United Kingdom, then I'm perfectly willing to do that.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all very much.
All right. So there he is. Carney's going there again tomorrow. This is strengthening and reconstituting, I think, on some level, Canada's relationship with the UK, our unbreakable bond, really, because of our roots and ongoing ties to the UK. King's still our head of state, so it makes perfect sense for Carney to be going there, especially in this time of crisis. And as much as he's going to see the king, though, it's Carney who has been on the world stage, especially since his speech in Davos, in a way that has put him in the spotlight. Maybe not as much in the media, because what he brought to Davos was cerebral. It was deep. It was thoughtful. It was an acknowledgement of a change in the world order. He acknowledged that there is this new world order upon us, and that we'll probably never be going back to the old world order or the rules-based international order as we've known it. But with him saying that, it's very clear tonight that there are two options, two paths that are being presented to the world. One is the New World Order of Donald Trump, which is a one world government, essentially, maybe comprised of Russia, China, the United States, depending on how these gangsters work out the deal. Or it could end up being just the United States, because there's no honor among thieves. So it depends on how all of this rolls out, but it is happening. That much is very clear. Carney acknowledged that. Just because he says the words New World Order does not mean that he endorses the New World Order. as it is rolling out over there. Now, you could get conspiratorial about this and say they're all in it together and they're all working toward the same goal, no matter what you do. I'm not so sure that's true, because what I'm seeing unfold is these other countries around the world, especially the capitalistic, the free world, if you will, the liberal democracies, looking for a way to reinvent themselves and each other and the alliance that we've had since the end of the Second World War, in order to maybe not bring in a completely new world order, but to evolve among middle powers an alternative to Donald Trump's new world order. You can see that you can see all of that as you look or read between the lines, so to speak, in what is being said, or look between the verbal lines here in the news conference today in Oslo. Listen to the way they speak. I'm going to pick up the news conference. You're about halfway through. The alarming thing here, and maybe the reassuring thing too, is that they're talking here, I'll pick it up here where they start to talk about nuclear weapons, the possible proliferation of nuclear weapons among the free world states, the free world. And you know what? The key here is they're saying we don't want them. We already have a nuclear deterrent. That's enough. Listen to what's said. This is a more mature, I think, and more responsible way of looking at the use of nuclear weapons as a deterrent, not as an aggressive tool. This deserves more thought, more discussion. We're going to get it, whether we like it or not, because the world is evolving. That's the key word here, too. It's not about domination or revolution. It's about evolution, which is a very Canadian thing. And Carney seems to be taking the lead on this. And the other leaders, really, they're looking to him. He's the man of the moment. And he seems to be stepping up. I hope he doesn't let us down.
Thanks. This is about the nuclear weapons, and it's for all of you. What are your thoughts about opening a discussion in your country, in your own countries, about loosening restrictions or policies when it comes to nuclear weapons, even during the peacetime? Thanks.
Maybe I can start. I want to say that Finland does not seek to have nuclear weapons to our territory, and nor is NATO making any such plans. What we are doing at this moment in Finland is our purpose of the government is to remove legal barriers which do not exist in this form in the other Nordic countries. On nuclear weapons, the initiative to adopt the French nuclear deterrence to increase wider European security, it was positive, but Finland has not had similar discussions as some other countries who are also presented here, but we are interested to hear more because we need to strengthen European deterrence.
I think the most, and following up on what Petri just said, I think the most important thing is to build a stronger NATO and Europeans' nuclear deterrence. It is a part of our overall deterrence of Europe and NATO, and therefore from a Danish perspective, we are now doing two things at the same time. We are deepening our engagement in NATO when it comes to nuclear deterrence, and at the same time we have accepted an invitation from France when it comes to deepen our cooperation with them. And I think it's positive from a European and from a Danish perspective also to be stronger in this area, but it has to go alongside with many other capabilities and many other investments as we're doing at the same time.
Well, for Norway's part, we are not changing legislation. We don't have to. We have our clear policy. There will be no stationing on nuclear weapons in Norway. We are a member of an alliance which has a key nuclear deterrent, which was confirmed at the recent NATO summits, and that is there. The French initiative, we have not been involved in the early stages of that, but we are ready to talk to France as we develop a strategic partnership with France on defense. To hear more about how their plans are, and obviously that is something which will go on for some time, but the key thing...
And I'll stop there for just a moment, because that's what he's talking about is a key component to this. France has indicated they are looking at making nuclear weapons available to other NATO countries. You see, so it's really an extension of what France is being able to offer. And with that being said, you see, therein lies the nuclear deterrence to anything that the United States might, or not, I'm not going to say the United States, that Donald Trump and his MAGA regime might be thinking, right, with regard to Canada, Greenland, even other NATO countries. This is the remainder of the free world coming together as middle powers to stand in unified opposition to this crazy new world order that is being imposed on other countries through coercive methods by Donald Trump. Remember a short time ago, as Trump was ramping up the 51st state rhetoric, do you remember what ended up being parked in the Halifax harbor? A French submarine. I said at that time, that is sending a message to the White House. Canada might look like a secondary or a puny little power. We might not have a military as large or as powerful as the United States of America, but we have friends. You see, we know we would never be allowed to have nuclear weapons on our soil in a way that might be perceived as any kind of threat to the United States. But we don't need them because we're part of an alliance. We have friends. Oh, by the way, the same friends the United States used to have until this incompetent buffoon, started to act like a maniac in the White House and started to punch all his friends in the face.
Here is not to weaken what is already the nuclear deterrent of NATO, upon which we all depend.
Yes. Canada does not seek nuclear weapons. There's no change in policy there. We, as others do, benefit from our membership of NATO, an alliance which does have a nuclear deterrent at its heart, as you know. I'll make two final comments. One is commend President Macron's initiative to provide a layered element to that deterrence. The modalities and the breadth of that, of course, to be worked out, but we commend that initiative from a NATO perspective, from a European security perspective. It's not directly affecting Canada. And then the last thing, which is not nuclear per se, but I just underscore in terms of the changing threat environment, the risk to Canada from new missile systems, hypersonic missiles and others, is necessitating big investments, including in over-the-horizon radar and beyond, in order to have a deterrence there.
And just stop there again for a moment. Do you see how the words have to be so carefully chosen? How delicate the matter is, especially for Canada, because we're physically attached through geography to the United States, which, to be clear, is still our ally, and yet we're being threatened by the country that is supposed to be our closest ally, but not the country. Donald Trump. He's setting the world on a kilter because he doesn't choose his, well, I think he does choose his words carefully. I think he knows exactly what he's doing. It might seem chaotic, but that's because his objectives don't align with what the objectives of the United States have normally been, or certainly NATO countries and the allies.
can easily echo what Mette Frederiksen just said, that we stand fully behind the NATO's common nuclear deterrence. We have no plans at all to change our own doctrine regarding nuclear weapons, and that does not exclude in any way our future potential cooperation with France when we now initiate this dialogue with France.
Got to be careful what you
yeah,
say.
on Iceland's part,
You don't want to get the orange orangutan upset.
we don't see any changes coming up. We only just recently said yes to
Iceland.
nuclear-powered submarine stocking in our waters. That was a big step for us. So, I mean, we are still under our ongoing strong partners of NATO, and we don't see any changes to that nuclear umbrella.
The last question today comes from Gladys Fouché, Reuters.
Good morning. My question is about Arctic Century and is for each of you. What is the number one challenge, whether short-term or long-term, that you want Arctic Century to help you solve?
Well, the biggest, I'll start. Look, the biggest security threat, physical security threat in the Arctic is Russia. And there are various aspects of that. There are other layered threats in there, but first and foremost, and consistent with many of the other aspects of NATO security development, is unfortunately it is a common threat, and that is the case in the Arctic. First point. Second, I just underscore that it is welcome, arguably overdue, but welcome, that now NATO is focusing increasingly on Arctic security, and Arctic Century obviously is a manifestation of that. It needs to be fully developed, and what you're hearing from all of us is the commitment in order to do that. Mette?
Can I just add, I totally agree with Mark, and what we have seen until now has been different kind of training activities and so on. I think what is most important about Arctic Century is that we now want to be permanent present in the Arctic region. And by the way, as everybody knows, in the Arctic region, it's enormous, and there are a lot of differences in the region. But to be permanent present and to also have the support from the rest of NATO, because as Arctic states, I mean, we have been aware about the security situation, of course, for many years, and as Mark just said, it is changing because of Russia. But now we have the support from the rest of NATO. We need to be permanent present. We need to be strong on surveillance, and we need, of course, together to invest in the needed capabilities, and by common procurement, by common investments, and by this framework that has been decided on. I think we are in a much better and in a much stronger position now to protect the Arctic region.
Can I say that if you think about NATO's presence in the Arctic and you go 20 years back in time, it was very little. And we have worked on Arctic nations to bring the Arctic to the center of attention of NATO, because NATO should matter to all of NATO territory. So I would say that this initiative should respond to security and stability. And right now, as we speak, we have 34,000 troops exercising in northern Finland and northern Norway. That's a NATO exercise being led for the circumstances in that part of the Arctic. And now we are also developing capacities tailored to the challenges in broader parts of the Arctic. So this is the right thing to go. You don't need the same response at every place, but I agree with Prime Minister Carney that Russia is a defining threat. On the longer horizon, you can see China, you can see other dimensions, and we should, prepare in time for that.
Mm-hmm. Can I come in on that? I
Did
think
you
this
miss
is
any
exactly what we were discussing
there?
at the beginning of
One
sort of. I hate to call this a silver lining, but I mean, the countries in this region have for a while been talking about increased presence. For NATO, we discussed this in Jeff with the Joint Expeditionary Forces. And even for a country like Iceland that doesn't have a military, we have a lot of personnel and support capacities that need to have training, need to have oversight, and at the end of the day, need to understand their own backyard. And I think this is something that does create a sense of security for the people who actually live in that part of the world, that they see that there is active training, there is an active presence. And so even though we've wanted to keep the Arctic a low tension zone, we need to be in touch with reality. This is reality we are living in. So it is a positive development, even though obviously the environment that we're operating in might not be positive.
Yeah,
to say the least.
My colleagues don't have so much to add to that. Thanks.
Maybe I can add that. From my point of view, we are on the right track now on the question of the Arctic security. We all need to take care in the NATO that we continue our work together to strengthen Arctic security. That's why Arctic Sentry is so crucial. What we need is more Arctic capabilities. And what we need also to do, we need plans, we need to practice together like we are doing now in North. And actually, we need to understand that Russia is our biggest threat. And it will remain to be a threat for Nordic Arctic countries. And that's why we have to go forward to strengthen Arctic security together.
And there you go. There's an elephant in the room. Oh, no, it's not in the room. That's sort of the point. The United States has a presence in the Arctic too, right? Alaska. And they have bases already in Greenland. Do you see the United States there? No. Then they never came out and did you hear the T word even one time? Even once? No. Nope. No. Because they were looking to our guy, which surprised me, honestly. Today when I watched this, it surprised me that they are all looking to Mark Carney and to Canada for leadership here. Listen, here's the Prime Minister of Denmark.
It's great to have you among us, the Nordic leaders. And I have to say to you that you have a lot of supporters in our countries. The speech you gave in Davos, I have never experienced anything like this. I mean, people in Denmark, and I guess the same goes for the rest of the Nordic countries, have been talking about, they have been reading your speech. And I don't think I have ever heard so many reflections on a speech from a colleague as I have heard about your speech in Davos. And it is because you show leadership. You are talking about how democracies can work together and that we have to connect even closer in this world where the old world order is gone and it will probably not come back. So we have to build something new. And it has to be a world order that is built on the values that we represent, the leaders standing in front of you today. Dear Mark, it's great.
Yeah. Wow. Like, wow. Maybe it doesn't hit you the way it hit me, but that's a big wow moment for me. I said that speech that he gave in Davos was maybe the greatest speech ever given by a Canadian Prime Minister. I can't say for sure because I can't say I'm familiar with every speech ever given by every Prime Minister since it's like 1867. But wow, to have that kind of impact on the world stage. See, like I say, you can have peace through strength, and that is certainly a valid perspective. It's important to be strong so you can have peace. But the key there is to use that strength as a deterrent. I think Donald Trump, with his hubris, has forgotten that, lost sight of that, if he ever knew it at all, because he's going around throwing his weight, or I should say the weight of the U.S. military around, I think, in a very irresponsible way. The whole world is This is not peaceful. This is supposed to be the president of peace. And the United States has created a very chaotic, very dangerous, and a much more violent world with a lot more death in a very short period of time. This is not Trump 1.0. Trump 2.0 is different. It is different. He's different. Something has gone awry. But Canada's there. And we are pivoting away from the United States, as are all other countries, frankly. We're just doing it without coming right out and saying it out loud, because the United States is Godzilla, because the United States does have a massive nuclear arsenal and aircraft carriers and all kinds of high-tech weaponry that, by the way, they are depleting rapidly over in the Middle East right now as they wage war with Iran, a war that Trump says has been waged for the past, 47 years, since 1979? No, this goes way, way back, much, much further back than that, to 53, and even before that. This is an ongoing power struggle. And this is why all those leaders stood up there, all of them today, and said, it's not our war, asked about Iran. So, well, it's not really our war, but we're all affected by it. It's a war about oil. It's an oil war at this point. It is an energy war because of the Strait of Hormuz. It's a choke point. They haven't planned for this. They have not planned for it. It doesn't matter what has been said. Oh, it's about the nuclear weapons program. No, it's not. Because all the intelligence shows that Iran was still years away. No evidence. This is worse than what was done in Iraq. At least with Iraq, they made an effort to convince people, even through propaganda, babies and incubators. Remember all the Middle East, Kuwait, then Iraq, justifying it, building a coalition of sorts. Even as they went into Iraq, there was a coalition there. Nothing. They only have Israel. Trump doesn't have other countries supporting this. Other countries are being maybe sucked into it, drawn into it, because Iran is attacking neighboring Gulf countries. But the United States, Trump, I keep saying it's Trump. Trump doesn't have any support. He's isolated the United States. The United States is much weaker than it has ever been in my lifetime. Built up over time as the world's greatest superpower. And what has he done? He has squandered the power of the United States, because the real power of the United States has never been in its nuclear weapons or in its massive high-tech arsenal with $1 trillion a year budget. It's been in the friendships and the alliances among the free world nations, because it's that has been the most powerful tool to spread peace around the world. It's because other countries wanted to be part of something that was so great, the greatest level of prosperity ever brought to mankind, brought to the world through free, well, not entirely free markets, but through an economic system that was the most efficient ever in the history of mankind. A post-World War II system that brought stability to the world to some degree. Never completely free or peaceful, because a lot of these disputes still raging, and a struggle, of course, between the communist Iron Curtain countries, the Soviet Union, Soviet bloc, all of that stuff, and the free world, if you want to call it the free world. The point is, more and more countries joined NATO. More and more countries wanted to join the West because of the prosperity that was available to us. Now, also, you could argue that in some cases that prosperity and freedom was imposed in a way by the United States. But no, I would argue too that, especially in the case of the United Kingdom, there was an evolution that took place where, as a colonial power, they realized that it was maybe more beneficial over time to become less militaristic, less coercive, less oppressive. And even if you look at the evolution of Canada, how has Canada evolved in a peaceful way? Because like other Commonwealth countries that have evolved over time, we have matured and evolved into our own nation state where we have our own foreign policies. And while he still is the head of state, the king, Canada is absolutely its own country today. Its own country. We are a real country. And we have a place on the world stage. And that's maybe why it was such a wow moment for me today watching that news conference, because Canadians have, I think, something of an inferiority complex because we live next door to Godzilla, because we compare ourselves to the United States, because we're also subjected, exposed to so much U.S. media. Our own history gets blended in, people get confused, and we're constantly told that the United States, America, number one, America, USA, USA. Yeah, I get it. But where is the world looking right now? For leadership and hope. To the country that wants to collaborate, the country that wants to cooperate, the country that has shown the world that through its system of government, a system of government that even among us, the Canadians ourselves, is largely not even fully understood. I think Canadians are more familiar with the U.S. Constitution than our own. And U.S. laws, and it all gets mixed up. But where is the world looking for hope? To Canada tonight for direction. Carney referenced everything happening up there as an evolution, and that has been Canada's hallmark. We were not a country that was created out of revolution. We were a country that was born through evolution, and we continue to evolve because we are still a young country. And yet our history is, as we may be a young country, having been formed technically in 1867, but our history is just as long and just as storied as the United States. Whether Donald Trump realizes it or not, we're always going to be joined at the hip, and we'll always be related. And one way or another, things are going to work out, and we'll still be friends. But this stuff right now, it's very disruptive. And Trump has damaged the United States. That's the point. He's hurting the U.S. He's isolating the U.S. And so tonight, well, Canada is the country that so much of the world is looking to for leadership. Contrary to what my very good friend, Joseph Leonard, keeps saying, America first doesn't mean America alone. Yeah, that's exactly what it means. That's exactly what it means, because Trump doesn't think he needs to consult with anybody else. He doesn't need to coordinate with anybody else. He gets to do whatever he wants because he's got the nukes. And I think that's sad, because the United States tonight really does find itself maybe not alone, but we are in a situation where you have America almost alone.
news. The world is watching.
And a lot of countries are furious with the United States right now because of what's going on in the Middle East, because this has disrupted oil supplies, because this is not just affecting, the oil, it is affecting the world economy. It's turning everything upside down. Gulf states are upset. And while they might get sucked in and end up fighting, if they are sucked into the war, they'll fight alongside the United States. They're not happy with it, what Trump is doing. And even within the United States itself, you are seeing so much pushback against what is happening with this war. Taking the focus off what's going on in Ukraine very much, which I think benefits Vladimir Putin, and a lot of what Trump is doing actually here is strangely, it's benefiting Putin. Article tonight sent to me from The Economist in my email. I haven't read the whole thing, but they're highlighting the fact that what's going on with the war, because of what Trump has done, and because of what this has done to the oil shipments through the Strait of Hormuz, Russia is turning out to be the big winner because oil prices have skyrocketed. They're back up over $100 a barrel tonight, I believe. They were at $100 a barrel this afternoon. I'm sure they're hovering around there right now. And the other thing is that Trump has now lifted the sanctions on Russian oil. Zelensky very concerned about that because that's putting billions and billions of dollars back into the Russian economy. You can have your position on the Ukraine war one way or the other, but these are undeniable developments and facts. Billions of dollars getting pumped back into Russia. Countries like Hungary, which I don't think is really truly a friend of NATO or the West anymore. It's a pro-Russian satellite country at this point, and aligned with Trump. They're putting pressure on Ukraine to let the oil flow through pipelines again to European destinations and other European countries. And keep in mind too that if you go back and think about what Trump, the positions he was taking before, putting pressure on European countries to not buy Russian oil, and yet what is he doing? He's in the media, he's acting like that, or saying these things, but then his actions are the opposite of that. He was always reluctant to put sanctions on Russian oil. Then the Russian oil is sanctioned, but now he's lifting the sanctions on the Russian oil. Everything going on in the Middle East is benefiting Russia. Russia is not directly involved in the war. Russia providing intelligence so Iran can target U.S. personnel in the war, so they're actually engaged and targeting that way, in opposition to, as an adversary of the United States. Trump kind of shrugs it off like it's no big deal. Now, at the same time, I guess he's saying, well, what do you expect? We're providing intelligence to Ukraine, but it was Russia that invaded Ukraine. It wasn't the other way around. And in this case, it's the United States launching this attack on Iran, Russia involved that way because they're so closely aligned. It's a very complicated little web, isn't it? And yet it's Russia, and even China is benefiting from this conflict in the Middle East. And all the indications are the United States is burning through a lot of its ammo, its high-tech ammo, as a result of this war. A retired Canadian general tonight saying the U.S. has underestimated Iran's means to fight. Here, I'll show you. As I said the other day, I think the plan is that there really isn't a plan beyond bomb Iran. I think that's the plan. I think that's all it was to begin with. I think they just decided they were going to go in and bomb Iran and then hope for the best. I think that's it. Nothing more sophisticated than that. U.S. has underestimated Iran's means to fight, says former Canadian general. Let's click on the link and open it up into the wider story. Perched on last week, U.S. Patriot missile defense system was deployed to this base in Turkey. After 2 missiles fired from Iran were shot down, on Friday a third was intercepted. But see, it's very expensive to use these interceptors. I am not scared, says Mehmet, a shop owner in nearby Malatya. When asked how he feels about the war raging next door in Iran, we didn't have problems with Iran before, but if something happens, we can go and fight for our country, blah, blah, blah. And right here, this is a war of economics right now, said retired Major General David Fraser on CTV's military analyst and former NATO commander in Afghanistan. To shoot down a $60,000 drone, the price ratio on that could be 163 to 1. Effective, but certainly not efficient. It isn't just a retired Canadian general. There's heavy criticism, diplomatic, but heavy criticism being leveled at Trump, also from very learned, credible military experts in the United States. I wanted to highlight this for you tonight as a connector to this. General Stanley McChrystal, invited to speak at this conference put on by The Atlantic about the Jolene Doctrine, but it turns into it's a book festival where McChrystal was speaking, and it turned into a big Q&A and discussion about Iran. I'm going to run some of this for you because it lays it all out in very much the same way that, honestly, I've been talking about it, feeling about it for what, but I'm not a retired general. This guy is, so he's got the credibility and the experience. What he says carries weight.
A little bit behind the scenes about what decisions were made. The best gloss I can put on it, and this is apart from the whole question of whether it was the right thing to do, the best gloss I can put on it is that both the American and the Israeli governments saw that the Iranian regime was at one of its weakest points in the history of the Islamic Republic, if not the very weakest. Their proxies have mostly been not neutralized, but hurt, especially in Syria. They've lost their ally. In Lebanon, Israel did a lot of damage to Hezbollah last year and the year before. The Houthis seem to be quiet right now. I'm not quite sure what's going on with that. So maybe they decided this is the moment to do whatever we think we need to do in order to damage or destroy their ballistic missile program and put their nuclear program out of action for this foreseeable future. Forever is the word that Pete Hegseth used. I don't know what that means actually, but that's the best. And then maybe get lucky and the regime falls because maybe 2/3 or more of the Iranian people see it as a repressive, intolerable regime.
But let me ask you,
that's the best case. That's the best gloss I can put on it.
Right. Let me ask you about that. The possibility of regime change. I think the three of us, and probably the majority of people in this room, understand that it's a heinous regime. They just killed, we don't know the number for sure, but possibly 30,000 of their own citizens who are protesting the government. The sympathy is obviously with the Iranian people. Does the use of this kind of force that America is bringing to bear and Israel bringing to bear on the regime itself, does that help the people rise up? Or because the reason I ask is because you can knock out ballistic missiles, but they weren't using ballistic missiles to keep people in line in the cities. They're using handguns.
My sympathies are deep. My wife has written a book about the Iranian democratic movement. She's been to Iran half a dozen times. We have a lot of Iranian friends. We're very connected to the Iranian diaspora community, which is divided. It's divided. Some think things had reached such an intolerable pass, not just Iranians outside, but Iranians inside, that anything had to be better than that. There's a expression in Persian, there's no shade darker than black. And that means it had reached the darkest it could get in January. So part of me emotionally is, I want this to have that effect. I want the regime to collapse. It is not collapsing. Regimes don't seem to collapse under air power. It's sort of a lesson of history. And if anything, I fear that the use of our and Israel's air power has become so extensive. Desalination plants, oil depots, electrical grids, dual-use facilities that civilians rely on, plus maybe a police station right next to a classical palace or a mosque, that we may be turning the Iranians who hated their regime into Iranians who were saying, why are they attacking us? We're not the ones who they were going to attack.
Stan, talk about the complications of trying to help a population free itself while also trying to eliminate the offensive capabilities of the regime itself.
Yeah, the thing to remember about any regime, particularly when it's got military and police forces, they become targets, they become natural targets. They are also fathers, they are brothers, they are sisters. And so every time you target what you think is a legitimate target, and it is, you're also targeting part of the population. And the reality is these wars become very personal. You know, you start a war for political reasons, and then pretty soon somebody kills your comrade or someone in your family, and it gets a different intensity for you. And I think that happens with societies as well. So when we begin and we think that Saddam Hussein was a bad guy and people didn't like him, so we toppled the Saddam Hussein regime, and we thought that automatically that would be popular because people would be liberated. Well, what happened was many of them lost their positions, some way down in the government, they lost their pensions, the electricity went out, and within weeks, the liberators that we thought we were perceived as foreign occupiers and people who probably didn't like Saddam Hussein at all were picking up rocket-propelled grenades and shooting at Americans. And then as you started the violence between that, it gets its own momentum. So that's what gets so complicated. It's at the end of the day, a nation is the fabric of the people. It's not a thing on a map, and it's not a symbol of a government.
You know, you have a lot of experience with a lot of presidents. Talk about this president and his Secretary of Defense and the way they make decisions and whether you trust the way they make decisions.
Yeah. I'm going to start with a comparison. The ones I got to know well were President George W. Bush and his group, and then President Obama. And they were very different. But in both cases, I thought that if, in the case of my interactions, if I made my case, that they were listening and that they would make the best decision that they could with the information that they had. I didn't always agree. I didn't agree with the invasion of Iraq, but I thought President Bush made it in good faith. I don't have the same confidence right now. Yeah.
And the Book Festival Award for Understatement goes to Stanley McChrystal. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean...
Well, talk about that. Talk about that in a serious way, yeah.
That's a really important thing because military, you know, I'm on our side. The soldiers who are out there, my heart is with American soldiers. Don't get me wrong there. But I want the people making decisions to be very thoughtful about it as they put young men and women in harm's way, as they decide to put even our opponents and civilians in harm's way, because that's going to happen. I want a very thoughtful approach to that, and there will be very hard decisions made. I remember when, well, I'm not going to tell a war story here. You make decisions sometimes when you know civilians will die as a result of that. And I want the people making that decision to think about it and feel it. I don't want anybody to make jokes about it. I don't want anybody to be flippant about it. And I don't want ever our government to have sort of a braggadocious attitude toward them.
You began with a bit of understatement. I think you then worked your way up to statement. So at the risk of overstatement, but that's partly what Jeff and I do for a living.
Speak for yourself.
I work for you, man. It's shocking to watch Secretary Hegseth give his briefings at the Pentagon. It's shocking to hear him puff his chest up and talk about death and destruction raining down from the sky all day long, as if what we are is marauding bandits whose only goal is a kind of violent subjugation. How does that sound to anyone who is living under the Islamic Republic and is desperate for change and thought, because President Trump told them, that we were going to come help? It's shocking to hear President Trump deny that the airstrike on the school that was next to the Navy base in southern Iran was a Tomahawk and one of ours, and instead to say it was Iran's. He knew that was a lie. So we can't believe what we're hearing. And in a way, the lying and the utter contempt for human values go together. They're both a sign that, they're both a sign that all the rules are off, that the restraints are gone. And without restraint, what happens in war? Well, what happens is the soldiers down the line are put in a position where they have to choose between this new culture of there are no more rules, stupid rules of engagement, Hegseth called them, and perhaps have to live with their conscience for the rest of their lives for doing something they know is wrong, or run afoul of the chain of command. It's a terrible position to put them in.
Yeah, I think, George, you hit something really important. And I'd just like to give a view that I've had for a while. We use the term warrior sometimes, and I'm really uncomfortable with that. We say the warrior ethos, because in my mind, the warrior ethos is sort of an ungoverned group of people, almost like the Huns who come. An army is not that. An army is a disciplined group of people that are following the orders of civilian government. They have rules of warfare. They have discipline that keeps them. They are led by leaders who match that. And if we don't remember that when we send people forward with weapons, with incredible power to kill, that the most important thing we have to have is incredible self-control at the individual level and at the organization level. We got to be lethal, but it has to be in a very mature way.
What's your analysis of Secretary Hegseth and the way he speaks about warfare, and what is to jump onto something that George is alluding to, what is the downrange consequence of that language? And I'll throw another one on, which is, in your long career and storied career, have you heard other American leaders talk the way our current leaders talk?
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. If you go back, if you take a two-dimensional view of George Patton, you might say that. But actually, if you listen to what he said and wrote and how he did discipline, it wasn't that way at all. And
Patton believed in studying history and in military education.
Exactly. He understood a disciplined army was important. The problem with what we're talking about here is most of the people on the battlefield are 18 or 19 years old. They are still malleable. They are influenced by their sergeants, by their lieutenants, by their captains, and by the rhetoric of their leaders. And if the rhetoric of their leaders gives this idea that this is what you've got to be, and if you are not macho enough, then you are not going to be an effective service member. And I completely disagree with that. I think that if you are a good service member, you perform your duty well and competently, and you're willing to serve. That's the definition of it. And so I think when we start throwing out these terms, we really risk confusing the young people at the lowest level who have got to show, in many cases, the greatest maturity and restraint.
Jeff, you mentioned that we met when we were both covering the Iraq War. I do remember once President Bush saying, "Bring it on." Do you remember that? He got a ton of criticism for saying that because it seemed to be inviting attacks. It's a sign. It was
so macho posturing.
It was posturing, but it was 1 3-word mistake, or it's a sign of how our leadership has fallen, that those 3 words wouldn't even be noticed today. It would be almost toning it down a little bit if Hegseth said, "Bring it on." And this has a strategic implication too, because I'm obviously having a lot of bad memories of the Iraq War and the early years of it. It seems that the lesson that this administration has learned is from a prolonged counterinsurgency and occupation is, well, we'll never do it the hard way again. We're going to do it the easy way. The hard way didn't work. Years and years with 150,000 American troops didn't work. We're going to do it the easy way. And so Hegseth has this dismissive phrase about no nation building, no Paul Bremer, who was the civilian administrator of the first year of the occupation, as if the easy way works. And the easy way is rain death and destruction from the sky and then just see what happens.
Well, let me note, though, not playing devil's advocate here, but maybe a little bit, let me note that the United States won World War II by raining death and destruction down on whole cities across Germany and Japan that got the absolute surrender of those countries. What's different? Why was that effective, and what's different between now and then?
One observation I'd make about that is it was a total war. Air power did not win World War II. In fact, ground forces in every case. Nuclear power did finally dissuade the Japanese, but that was after we'd already gone through Okinawa on the ground. And then we did do nation building. We just did it after the war. People think we didn't. Counterinsurgency was performed in Europe after the war. The Marshall Plan was all part of not allowing Europe or Asia to go in a wrong direction. And we need to remember that at the end of the day, anything you break, you need to build.
I'd add that we won. I'm not sure that we should look back on the incineration of Japanese cities and the leveling of German cities was a high point, in American.
No, but what I'm asking is, was it a necessary predicate?
Yeah, we won. Here's the thing: we were not fighting for the populations of those countries. Those populations were, by all appearances, in total war against the Allies. And once that was on, our leaders had the attitude of, they're fighting a total war, we have to fight a total war. This is utterly different. We have a population in Iran that supposedly President Trump wants to liberate from the Islamic Republic. You can't do it the way we did it in World War II, because that's sheer destruction. And that's why the tactics and the attitude of braggadocio, as Stan said, has a strategic effect, which I think is terrible, which is whatever we may be achieving as far as degrading the Iranian, the IRGC, and the regular military, I worry that it's going to have the negative effect on the people, not just killing them, but turning them against the idea that we are there with any of their interests at heart. And why would they think so when Trump hasn't even spoken to them in a way that that says that?
Right. Stan, let me lift up a little bit and ask you this. You know, by the time you had some stars on your shoulder by the time you were dealing with George W. Bush and Barack Obama. You got to understand their doctrines. Maybe you didn't agree with this doctrine or that doctrine, but they had doctrines. How would you define, looking not only at Iran, but Venezuela, Nigeria, Greenland, the Greenland discourse, and so on? How do you explain the Trump doctrine?
I'm a big fan of Dolly Parton, and do you remember this?
Where is this going?
Can't wait. I really can't.
Do you remember her song, Jolene?
Yeah.
And this poor wife says, Jolene, please don't take my man. Don't take him just because you can. And that's what worries me. I think we might be in a period where we think what we can do, we should do because we can. And I think the world is starting to view us that way.
I think, by the way, just putting my editor hat on.
Yeah. We'll leave it there. You know what I'll do? I'll put the link to this video in the Rumble chat. If you want to watch the whole thing, there it is. On Rumble One. You can partake in that if you wish. The wise words from somebody who's been around the block a few times, who seems to, I think, understand geopolitics with a greater depth than the president. And he understands that what happens today is going to impact the United States the way it's viewed by the rest of the world tomorrow, and maybe for decades, maybe beyond that. That's why Carney is saying, and these other world leaders are saying, the old world order is not coming back, but two paths forward, I think, being presented as options. So many people saying, trust the plan, there's nothing you can do. Yes, there is a lot that we can do, even as individuals. We make choices every day, and what you support, what you believe, what you think, it matters more than you think. That's why they spend so much time investing in propaganda, mind control, social media, influencing. And it has always been that way. Saw another video last night. It concerned me as much as it seems to, I guess, try to build pride in Canada. I'm not sure that's really what the objective is here at all. Actually, I think the podcast that it came from is American. It's being reposted and it's getting traction. It is circulating online. I think the name of the podcast is something like The Electrician or something like that. Anyway, these guys talk about military matters, reposted by a pro-conservative streamer, social media influencer, and actually he's a marketing guy. I would say a propagandist himself, actually. That is not the important point. The point being, and I guess it is important because it's being redistributed, reposted, I think, with intent. I'm going to run this, but what you are about to hear, I believe, is propaganda, because I believe that it is just part of a campaign being ramped up potentially to recruit people, to recruit you, maybe if you're young enough, to enlist, to go fight. Things are escalating. More than that, it's about reshaping the way, in this case, specifically Canadians view their country, the way we view our military, the way we view our society and ourselves. This is, as much as the conservative side for a long time has been accusatory of the left for revisionist history. This is exactly, in my view, what this video attempts to do. Well, it's not attempting, it's doing it, because a lot of people are going to buy into the messaging that comes from this video. On the surface, it seems like this is a pro-Canada video designed to make you to instill pride in you, in your heritage. But I put it to you that it's not accurate, and it is not really what Canada has ever stood for, really. There's an element of it, but that's where this becomes propaganda. There's an element of truth, an element of accuracy, but then it's wrapped up in exaggeration, and it takes us to a dark place that appears to be in the light. It's a mind, they're screwing with your mind. Let me play it for you, and I'll show you what I mean. I'm not even sure if they're doing this intentionally. They may just be regurgitating a meme, an attempt to make something almost humorous out of something very dark and gross, which is warfare. World War I. Listen.
And the Canadians are fucking badass trench warfare. Like, the first draft of the Geneva Convention is just a list of shit the Canadians did in World War I. The Canadians were like doing Pavlov shit to the enemy. They were throwing food into the enemy trenches every day at like breakfast time for like 2 days straight. So then like one day, 3 days in, they're just like, here's a couple of cans, and then they all start running up like a fucking pinata just got broke at a birthday party, and then they just start fucking throwing grenades into the trenches. It's all shit the Canadians did.
The World War I Canadians went crazy. Yeah, you guys were rough. You guys were gnarly. Oh, they were cleaning up trenches.
Germans were in their trenches, and they were like, oh, we all have to follow the rules of war. And the Canadians showed up, and they were like, what are rules of war? Yeah, just showed up. Welcome to Canada.
Whoa, there's so much wrong with that. I think you're watching that, and it might make you smile. You might be laughing. You might say, yeah, right on, Canada. We rock. We're gnarly. Macho man. So much wrong with that. First of all, a lot of it's just not true. And that's not what Canada really is about. There's some truth in it. But it's gross. Because what they just did there is they glamorized war crimes. They glamorized atrocities that they're accusing Canadian soldiers of committing in World War I. The truth is, yes, some of those things did happen. Yes, there are stories of Canadian soldiers in trenches throwing cans of food into enemy trenches and doing what he said. But listen to what he said carefully. How were the German soldiers portrayed? He said, the German soldiers said, well, we have to follow the rules of war. The Canadians didn't. That's how nasty we are. What are we dealing with this Trump administration? Oh, no more rules. Rules don't apply. International rules-based order out the window. War crimes, the United States doesn't care what war crimes it might commit because it's got veto power at the UN. It's not a member of the International Criminal Court. the U.S. can act with impunity. The point being, as much as that sounds like something that builds Canadian pride and makes you go, yes, right on Canada, because as though it's a football game where you scored a touchdown by mowing down a bunch of enemy soldiers in the trenches, it's glamorizing a war crime. And then they're taking it a step further to suggest, maybe as part of a joke or something, but there seems to be some seriousness to it, that the first part of the whole Geneva Convention, most of those rules of war were written because of what the Canadian soldiers did in World War I. That's how badass or maybe savage that they were at that time. That's not really accurate. The Geneva Conventions didn't focus on what Canadian soldiers did. The conventions focused on what happened during the wars by soldiers from all countries. Gross, man. Canada, it's said, matured in World War I and earned its place as a nation state because of the sacrifices made in World War I. And yes, the soldiers did fight ferociously. And yes, there's no question there were atrocities. And all of those things were taken into consideration at future Geneva Conventions. The thing is, all sides were committing those kinds of horrific crimes. In World War I, soldiers were being gassed in the trenches. Mustard gas. Those guys are glamorizing the violence of what was one of the most horrific, most deadly, most disgusting conflicts in human history. Very clickable. Builds an audience, but it's not truth. They make it sound like the Canadians just showed up and kicked ass. They just walked into those trenches, and then when those unsuspecting Germans got hungry enough, they'd throw them a can of rations. When they went over to get it, they just mow them down. Move on, next. It wasn't that simple. It wasn't like that at all. I wasn't there, but I know a little bit about history, enough to know that it was so harsh. There was nothing glamorous about fighting trench warfare in World War I. At all. It was savage. It turns people into animals. That's the problem I have with Hegseth, too. He sits there and speaks the way he speaks in these news conferences. You know, if you go back far enough, you'll find warfare was conducted by some cultures where they would kill the enemy and eat their hearts. You can find references to that even in old Canadian history texts, which I read about. It's true. They don't talk about it too much today. That's where warfare can go, because that's a complete breakdown in any kind of civility. You think it's civil or glamorous to gas the enemy with mustard gas? Burn their lungs out? They're pumping you up. They're pumping us all up. They're getting us ready. They're conditioning us with streams like that with social media, modern equivalent of television, posters. Take a short break, come back. I've got more.
Greetings, brave mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals, defenders of individual rights and freedoms, credible, trusted, grounded in reality. Maverick News, Maverick News. Defending free speech, free speech. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
World War I, you can go to any war. Propaganda was used to get young men, teenagers, to enlist. Not in Canada, just in Canada, but in all countries, the United States, Britain, Australia. It was a world war. So all the Western countries, and, Germany did it too. They all did it. But they would lie. They lie to you to get you to go. And they put pressure on you. Here are some posters from World War I. This is from the UK. Step into your place. Right, get on the bandwagon. Britons wants you, join your country's army. God save the king. This one here is important. Women of Britain say go. Women of Britain say go. This poster clearly demonstrates the application of commercial advertising techniques to the recruitment campaign and is appealing to Britain's female population to encourage more men to join the army, whilst depicting women and children as needing protection. However, the First World War substantially increased the numbers of women in paid work and the range of jobs that they undertook, and that was also the case in World War II. But the reason this one is important is because shaming was just one of the tools they used back in World War I to get young men to enlist. There was something, as I recall, called the White Feather Campaign that began in Britain, where men that didn't enlist would be shamed. And in fact, they enlisted some women to go out as part of a campaign to pin white feathers on men who were in civilian clothing that they accused of being cowards for not joining the army and going off to war, shaming them that way, pinning white feathers on them, handing white feathers out to shame young men into going to war. That found its way also over to other Commonwealth countries, including Canada, where the campaign loosely continued over here. And young men would be approached by women and handed white feathers and being accused of being cowards. The problem is that campaign itself became an aberration, a distortion of itself. And there were, what did they call it? Mistagging, mistargeting, I think. Mistargeting, because miss being a reference to the females who were engaged in these campaigns, and targeting, because they would end up targeting sometimes men who had been seriously wounded, injured in battle in World War I, who had served at the front, only to come home and then be seen walking down the street or on the street, and they would be approached by these women and given a white feather, which was an insult and an accusation of them being a coward, or other men who were exempt from service because of medical conditions or other legitimate reasons. So they came up with a badge that they would hand out to men who were legitimately exempt from additional service or initial service in order to, I guess, make it apparent so that they wouldn't be approached with the white feathers. But the point is, they would use shaming in order to get men to enlist. And they would put out posters saying, the happy men are at the front, selling the war to the public, selling the war especially to young men, many of them not old enough to even vote, to convince them to go to war. And of course, in the beginning, everybody's told these wars aren't going to last long at all. And yet somehow they always end up taking twists and turns that nobody expects. They drag on much longer than anyone is ever told. We're hearing tonight that the war in Iran is going to continue now for at least another 3 weeks. We're already into, what is this? Is this the third week now? We were told it's only going to last 3 to 4 weeks. Now Israel is saying they have at least another 3 weeks of attacks planned, thousands more targets still on a list that they want to hit inside Iran. Not clear still from the Trump administration how long this might last, but we're hearing at least 3 more weeks from Iran, from Israel. And from what we're hearing from military experts, the U.S. has completely miscalculated on this. This is being a big mistake by Donald Trump so far. It's not likely to end anytime soon because they really have kicked the hornet's nest. This is not Venezuela. And yes, don't get me wrong. I, too, want the best for America, the best for Canada, the best for the free world, the best for the people of Iran. But you better have a damn plan, preferably one that goes a little bit beyond just bomb them and hope for the best. The regime change that I think they were hoping they were going to get has not materialized. All you have now is a carbon copy, the next generation of leadership to replace the Ayatollah that they took out and the people around him. In fact, I think the people Trump had in mind for the job, maybe to fill the shoes of the Ayatollah Khamenei that they took out, they killed some of those people as part of their initial decapitation strike. Hope I'm wrong. I hope the others who are saying this is going to drag on for a while are wrong as well. And I hope I'm wrong when what I see on social media that suggests to me that they are pushing towards some sort of recruitment drive. We've already seen in Canada efforts to recruit more troops. They're ramping up those efforts to build the Canadian military. It's happening in sort of a quiet, reserved way. They don't want to alarm the United States, but that's clearly part of what we're seeing here. But whatever troops they recruit may be motivated because of this 51st state rhetoric and a very clear and present threat potentially to the sovereignty of Canada coming from the United States through Trump, not from the United States, from Trump. Let me be very clear. Those troops, whatever they might be built up with this in mind for, could also easily be sent over to the Middle East instead. And it seems like some people really want Canada to go to war, to just really get behind this U.S. effort. And that seems to be coming from the conservative side of things. Oh, I know the people out there who pushed back against me because I said that, there are probably legitimate reasons why Canada didn't report that strike on the base in Kuwait, where there were no Canadian casualties. But about 30 miles away, you had 6 U.S. service members killed Same base, two totally different communities. And then the conservatives coming out and hammering the liberals for not talking about it. I said, well, we don't know. There could be very legitimate reasons why. One of the legitimate reasons is that you don't want to go borrowing trouble. No casualties, no deaths, no Canadians are injured. The Canadian soldiers were apparently in a bunker. Had taken cover. Over on the U.S. side, 30 some miles away, two separate attacks, by the way. They didn't take shelter in a bunker. They should have, the Americans, but they didn't. They didn't take proper cover. And so the building they were in got hit. The area they were in got hit. They were killed. Over on the Canadian side, they were sheltered and away from the buildings that got struck. There's a lack of planning here, and they're not taking it seriously enough. They certainly hadn't from the beginning. Now they've bitten off more than I think they thought they were going to have to chew. And if you did what the conservatives say that the government should have done from the beginning in Canada, we would probably be immersed in this war right now as well. Because then they would use that to rattle the sabers, get people jacked up and say, they attacked Canada. We have to push back on this. We need a response. No, I think there was wisdom in that. And the other thing is, we don't really know why they didn't mention it. The Department of Defense is saying that they didn't mention it because of operational security reasons. That's valid. And in fact, for all we know, the Americans may not have wanted Canada to mention that they had also been attacked because they may not want attention drawn to the fact that they have Canadians on the base, that Canada is involved. Because if you think back, and I've highlighted this many times, in 1979, when the Iran hostage crisis first erupted, it was Canadians that helped get some Americans out so that they wouldn't be held as part of the group of Americans that were held hostage for, I think it was 444 days. And that was done sort of in a clandestine, covert, undercover kind of way, where you had people pretending to be a film crew. I've said for a long time, Canada is more valuable to the United States as an ally than as a separate country than as a 51st state. Another voice on the world stage and a friend of the United States, a sibling, a relative, more than a friend. A lot of reasons why maybe that stuff didn't get reported. Cooler heads prevailing. That's what we need right now. Thoughtful approaches. The other thing to remember here, too, is a lot of people taking slingshots and trying to pop the prime minister in the head because he didn't report, wasn't enough transparency on that attack. Canada is not the United States, and the prime minister is not a commander-in-chief. And we are not at war. And so there are no wartime powers afforded to the prime minister at this time or his cabinet. If we go to war, that will change a bit, but even so, the prime minister does not have the unitary executive power that the commander-in-chief, the United States, has, Donald Trump, where he doesn't even recognize his limitations on power. He just goes out and does whatever he wants. But in Canada, we have something that is more democratic, a better system, with more checks and balances in place, where the prime minister is reined in and doesn't have those kinds of powers. And therefore, he was quite right to also say in the news conference the other day, which he's being criticized for saying, there's more than me that just speaks about this. There are more other people who speak to this other than myself, and that is very true. And because of the nature of that attack, it was maybe even improper for the prime minister to come out and address that initially himself. Because in order to address those kinds of operational things properly, those kinds of matters where you don't have casualties, so there's no immediate need to inform families back home to raise alarm or to inform anyone of any deaths or casualties, that would be a slightly different matter. But in this particular case, it's more appropriate for the initial announcements on these kinds of things to come directly from the Department of Defense itself and or through the defense minister, through a chain of not command so much, but a chain of communication so that it's handled properly and with strategy in mind. There's an old saying, and it certainly can apply here, loose lips sink ships. And when you're dealing with damage assessments, information on how on attacks on your targets, allied targets, sometimes the less said, the better. So I just draw your attention to it in that perspective. There's a lot we don't know. The allegation here, of course, is that for some reason the Carney government is just trying to hide things. It all comes out in the wash. Well, not all of it. It's war. They tell you what they want us to know. So I'm not going to sit here in judgment on that particular issue. I just highlight it again because there's so much knee-jerk reaction, and there are a lot of people who really do, especially in the early days of any kind of conflict, they want to get involved. There's a lot of cheerleading that goes on, and it's happening because we are not being exposed to the true horrors of the war. We're not seeing the death. As much as I said the other night that there's more information flowing out there with regard to this warfare. There's more video out there for sure. But not like it was in Vietnam. I remember as a kid watching the 6 p.m. news, and there was film footage of actual casualties, bodies being broadcast on the 6 p.m. evening news on television, network television, back in those days. That's what led to such, harsh and strong anti-war movements in the United States, the pushback that came. And I've said they learned from that experience in the United States to not let that happen anymore. You fast forward even just, short time later into the future, and other wars, whether it was Kuwait, Iraq, whatever, you just didn't get that kind of coverage anymore. They control the media much more carefully after that. So then it becomes like sports coverage. CNN. I remember the wars in the Gulf, Kuwait, and Iraq, and the watching the anchors, especially on CNN, they dominated the live coverage at the time. But it was sanitized, all of it. You didn't see dead bodies. You just saw fireworks, shock and awe, explosions and against the darkened sky. And the graphics and the blow-dried news anchors moving things around on a board. Fast forward to today, social media, we think we're getting so much more information. But you know what I've noticed is what I haven't been seeing, and that's bodies. Whether it's, in some cases you're seeing some stuff out of Ukraine. That's a little more raw, a little more real. But out of Iran right now, you're seeing bodies. I see a lot of fireworks. I see a lot of missiles. Even in Israel, I see a lot of missiles, right? But less so now because they're imposing more censorship in Israel. You're not seeing everything. Social media is being filtered. You think you're getting the full picture because you're seeing all this stuff, but it isn't. It's very controlled. Not just in the content going up, but also in what's ultimately being fed to you through the algorithms. And it's all designed to gin up support for the war in one way or another. Make no mistake, Elon Musk, Twitter, TikTok, it's all controlled. Some of it gets through, a lot of it. But tonight in Iran itself, they've shut down the internet, complete internet shut down. And they're going apparently door to door, trying to find people who have Starlink equipment to shut that down, because the Iranian government saying that U.S. propaganda is a lot of what is fueling everything with regard to this war. And they've been saying that from the very beginning. I said the other night, too, that, and I'll highlight this for you now. A lot of the pictures that I've seen of the bodies, they resemble what I was seeing during the pandemic. And I think you understand what I mean by that, right? Yeah. Going to take a short break, come back. I'll show you exactly what I mean. Makes me wonder if what we're seeing is real or fake.
Greetings, brave mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals, defenders of individual rights and freedoms, credible, trusted, grounded in reality. Maverick News, Maverick News. Defending free speech, free speech. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
Let me show you what I'm talking about, if I can. There are all these reports. You heard it even in that presentation, which I brought you, that video from The Atlantic and General McChrystal, and the reference to 30,000 people in Iran, protesters being killed by the Iranian regime. No question about it. They are brutal. They do execute political prisoners and protesters. They have done that in very public ways, including hanging them from cranes in order to make examples of those protesters, in order to push down, to quell any kind of political uprising, which the Iranian government says is being orchestrated, choreographed, fueled, funded, and promoted through social media, online, internet propaganda by the US and maybe other countries. 30,000, that's a big number. A lot of people. 30,000. That's what's being thrown around. Different numbers. The Iranians, of course, deny that. They don't deny that they have executed some people, but if you look up the information, you'll see that they're saying, no, that is not really accurate. They are, what numbers are they giving out here? I think they're in somewhere around the Iranian government denies the higher death toll estimates, attributing the violence to external interference and portraying the protests as hijacked by foreign agents rather than a genuine domestic uprising. Official statements emphasize a lower number of casualties, and they blame deaths on terrorists. See, this is the way all governments deal with these things, and provocateurs linked to U.S. and Israel. Iran's Supreme Council of National Security issued a statement January 21st, claiming 3,117 people killed during the uprising, including security personnel. Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei acknowledged several thousands killed, but blamed, quote, enemy agents from the U.S. and Israel for provoking unrest and boosting the death toll. In other words, we had to do it because the Americans and Israelis were meddling again, so we had to put it down. Well, you see that there is meddling that goes on out there. It's just they deal with it in a pretty deadly way. See, in Canada, yeah, you might get a mischief charge, drag you through the courts for a while. Iranian officials, including Khamenei, accused the U.S., specifically Trump, and Israel of orchestrating the protests through agents and terrorists. One man's freedom fighter is another man's terrorist. So a U.S.-backed freedom fighter is to the Iranian government a terrorist to destabilize the regime. State media and online operations promoted narratives that the uprising was a global conspiracy involving the CIA and Mossad rather than organic dissent. Does any of this sound familiar? It does to me. And don't get me wrong, still love the United States. Sometimes they get it right, sometimes they get it wrong. I think in this case, they might be getting it a bit wrong. Because I think Trump is messing this crap up. Bigly. Which brings me back to recruitment, clavicular, Andrew Tate, all this macho talk. As I sit and think about it, they are trying to promote a pro-masculine neo-patriarchy in the United States to, I guess, masculinize, at least in attitude, this current generation of young men. Speculation maybe to just get them ready for something that is coming and get them to sign up voluntarily and join the fight. That video talking about Canada the way that they did, portraying Canada as this macho, kick-ass, no holds barred, rules be damned kind of country. Saying, that we basically didn't give a damn about the rules of war. I don't know. It's alarming. These are shots from World War I. They made it sound in that video like it was just, they just waltzed in there and just mowed down the Germans, no problem, just don't care about the rules, and you just take them out. Back in the day, every time there's a war, promised it'll be over quickly, go fight. We have the upper hand, we have everything we need. But it doesn't matter what side you were on in World War I or any war, but does this look like it was easy or glamorous in any way or fun? Where some of the posters say, the happy man is on the front line. I saw one of those posters today. Propaganda. Do these guys look happy? And what are they showing you today? Steak and lobster from the Department of War. That's what they're feeding the U.S. soldiers. And people on Truth Social tonight saying, yeah, you can feed the soldiers steak and lobster. They're worth it. Do you really think they're getting steak and lobster in the war zone every day? Well, maybe Americans. Maybe. Could be propaganda. I doubt they get it every day. If history teaches you anything. I don't think the young men that went to war in World War I from Canada or any other country, I don't think that they went into those trenches and they were just so badass that they just fearlessly tossed a can of Spam into the enemy trench and waited for them to come over so they could mow them down without fear, and then just moved on. The truth is, they'd sit in these trenches and they'd get all kinds of diseases and suffer in the cold and the wet. And I think they were scared to death. As the gas attacks came, and I think they were petrified. And I think they just did whatever they thought they had to do to try to survive. And I don't think it was glamorous. I think that they suffered immensely. And the reason they were so scared is because they were probably sitting in a trench next to corpses, next to friends who had been alive just a short time before, or maybe days prior, rotting corpses. And the reason the German soldiers would run for the food is because they were starving. Because all sides had supply shortages and issues getting supplies to the front lines. And it wasn't just food, it was water. And when the mustard gas attacks came, they would urinate on handkerchiefs or other pieces of cloth and put that over their faces. And when they didn't have water to drink, they would drink their own urine. And if they were lucky enough to come home, never the same again. They say Canada earned its place on the world stage as a true nation state in World War I. Because of the sacrifices of the young men that went to fight. But I'm not laughing. And I find it offensive every time somebody says Canada's not a real country. Because it sure as hell is. We've earned it. They earned it for us. I hope this helps. History is there for us to learn from if we choose to. Wasn't even that long ago, really. Don't let them sell you the war. I think General McChrystal got it right. Sometimes you have to defend yourself. But you don't have to go looking for trouble. And just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. Love you guys. See you back here tomorrow, 7 p.m. Eastern, on the flip side.
This has been a Maverick Multimedia production.